the production of the fifth James Bond film proves to be one of the most challenging and dangerous ever undertaken. First, the producers must find a director who can handle the enormous scope of a Bond film. Producer Cubby Broccoli makes the call to Lewis Gilbert, director of many war movies and currently the hit film Alfie.
He rang me one night and said that he'd seen Alfie and how would I like to do the next James Bond film.
Initially, Gilbert turns down the job.
And then Cubby rang me again the next morning and said, listen, you can't turn this film down, you know, because there's the world's largest cinema audience waiting to see what kind of a hash you're going to make of it.
Lewis Gilbert brings on Academy Award-winning director of photography, Freddie Young.
I said to Cubby, look, let's get somebody who is one of the great artists of British cinema.
We all set off to Japan. Cubby, Harry, Freddie Young, Lewis Gilbert and myself.
Funnily enough, of course, I ran into Cubby and Lewis Gilbert in Tokyo, which I was visiting for a holiday. Cubby kept saying to me, why don't you come with us and do the second unit?
The locations in Tokyo were no problem, and places like Kyoto, but we couldn't find really any of the castles and locations that Ian Fleming had talked about. So we decided that we charter 2 helicopters.
And this was very, very nerve-wracking.
Lewis had never flown in a helicopter before, so he was absolutely terrified. Our pilot, his hands were shaking badly.
The oldest man you've ever seen. And he started to point at the map with a very, very shaky hand. Of course, Cubby thought that was very funny, so did Ken Adam. And he suddenly started up, and off he went. We just got about 1,000 feet. He suddenly turned to me and he went, me, kamikaze pilot. And I thought, my God, here we are flying with the only living kamikaze pilot.
But he was a wonderful pilot.
In fact, he was the best pilot that we had. He was terrific.
We covered literally 2/3 of Japan in about 3 weeks, flying 7 hours every day.
We flew all over Japan looking for a castle that was on the sea, and apparently they never built castles anywhere near the sea.
It was quite a strenuous experience until we found this unbelievable volcanic area on Kyushu, and flying over this area was really dramatic. Looked almost like a moonscape.
Cubby always looked for a hook, what he called a hook, for the storyline. When he saw the top of this volcano, that was his hook. And he thought everything is going to now start out of this.
We decided that it would be interesting to have the villain live in one of these extinct craters.
It wasn't really water, but was something that could pull back. And, well, Ken Adam, of course, absolutely loved that. I mean, he went crazy as soon as the idea was mooted.
Cubby sort of gave me a sidelong glance and said, can you do it?
And that was the beginning of the story, really. That's how it came about.
The first challenge is leaving Japan alive.
It just happened at that time that a Canadian DC-8 came into land at Tokyo Airport and undershot the runway and hit all the beacons. The next morning, I had breakfast with the BOAC crew, and I asked the captain where he was going. He said, well, we are going to London, but we're going via Hong Kong.
The morning that they were booked on the plane, they got a call that they could see the ninja training film that moment.
And so we had to cancel the trip. And about an hour and a half later, there was not one person alive on that plane.
That plane crashed into a mountain.
It was quite horrifying.
I remember Harry going off about 2 days later, and everybody was so nervous.
Also remember, we were in serious trouble because the film had a release date. Sean's contract was running out, and we had no script. So the pressure was on everybody, and we lost the writer.
After Harold Jack Bloom's departure, the producers decide to hire noted short story writer Roald Dahl.
The producers had read Roald's stories, and they thought he would be the lovely writer for You Only Live Twice.
Roald Dahl had been a friend of Ian Fleming's, but is unproven as a screenwriter.
I've written a lot of stories with sin, not a lot with sex or sadism.
He was a very clever writer in offbeat subjects.
Based on Cubby Broccoli's initial idea, much of the story takes place inside a hollowed-out volcano. Ken Adam must produce the most challenging set of his career.
The challenge appealed to me also, you know, the shape of the volcano. I knew if it didn't work, I would never work in movies again.
Ken Adam was an interesting man. Once he knew what he was going to do, he would settle down and he'd produce the most amazing drawings.
When I had done 2 or 3 sketches, Cubby said, well, looks interesting. How much is it going to cost? You know? I quoted $1 million, and that was an enormous amount of money. And Cubby didn't blink an eyelid. And he said, if you can do it for $1 million, go ahead. And then my worries started.
The filmmakers have other worries. Casting. Director Gilbert makes a brilliant choice for the role of Taiga Tanaka. Japanese actor Tetsuro Tamba.
I worked with Tamba on another film where we taught him English, so it was a big bonus to have Tamba, who was a karate expert.
Casting actresses proves far more difficult.
I said, he wants a woman, doesn't he, to chase around and fall in love with. And they said, well, 3 would be better.
Many of Europe's top actresses and models compete for the role of assassin Helga Brandt.
In a Bond film, they kind of like to have unknown girls if they can.
To discover?
Yes. Well, not only discover, but it somehow gives a sense of realism to the film.
The public wants to see extremely pretty girl. I'm not that pretty.
First, sex appeal. And she must be tough.
Enjoy yourself.
I usually do.
What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?
They were looking for a blonde, blue-eyed, tall German girl, and they wound up with me. So they had to do something about it, and they gave me high heels, and he did my hair.
Mr. Osato believes in a healthy chest.
One of our problems on the film was that in order to shoot in Japan, they were very, very keen for us to use real Japanese girls.
And one of the things that we did do, of course, was test girls for the leading parts.
It was very difficult to find a girl who could speak even some English, who was something of an actress.
There was not a single Japanese actress that spoke English.
We siphoned it down to 2 who the Japanese liked, and they were rather pretty girls.
So the idea was that where they would be brought to England, taught English, be involved in the purely English-speaking atmosphere of the United Kingdom where nobody speaks Japanese.
Akiko Wakabayashi was very good. She really learned very, very fast.
I think I will enjoy very much serving under you.
The other girl, Mia, tried desperately hard, and I saw Tamba and I said, look, Tamba, this is a big problem to us. It's no good for her and it's no good for us. Will you take her out to dinner and tell her that she has to go back to Japan? He looked a bit glum, and he said, well, I'll try. And he took her out that night, and the next morning he came in, and I said, well, Tamba, how did it go? He said, tonight she commits suicide. She will jump out of the window at the Dorchester.
Lewis said, you know, he did literally go cold at that point.
So, of course, I rushed to Harry